family is asking for the opportunity to challenge the prosecutor's evidence and witnesses and be able to call their own. Now, in a separate move, the Lee family has appealed the judge's decision to vacate the conviction, and a Maryland Court of Special Appeals ruled earlier this year that the appeal can move forward, and that's scheduled for February. All right, still with me, forensic criminologist Dr. Laura Pettler and family law attorney Randy Kessler. Randy, I'll start with you. This appeal raises some interesting questions. Now, Young Lee's filing may not have any force in law because, quite frankly, after the vacating, they removed any kind of pending murder charges. Because, as you know, even though you vacate a conviction, the pending murder charges can still be around till they decide whether they're going to go forward. They've already decided that, so those are gone. So I don't know how much weight the court's going to give this, but it raises interesting questions because I think the question it asks is, who's checking the prosecutors? Even when they decide to correct themselves, they're saying, hey, the victims here, we still want to be able to double check and dot the I's and cross your T's.
Right, it's sort of the reverse of the benefit that victims usually have. You know, usually the victims have the state as their lawyer. We always talk about the prosecutors, they're really acting as the lawyers for the victims. They're not, they're the lawyers for us, for the state, for the community, and they're prosecuting the crime against the state or against the community. But usually the victims, in some sense, get lucky that they have free representation prosecuting the bad people. This is the opposite. When that representation isn't doing the victims right or doing what the victims would want, then where do you go? You can't really fire them. You can't sue them for malpractice because they're not really your lawyer. So it's an interesting issue. And maybe some more guidelines are going to be drawn, and maybe some more discussion is going to be had. It'll be interesting to see how the appellate court decides it, and more importantly, what they say in what we call dicta, how they explain their reasoning, and if they get into that issue in a little more depth.
You know, Dr. Pettler, what's interesting about this, one of the major reasons why the DA's office decided to drop these charges and not prosecute him again was this DNA issue, that they found some DNA and he was excluded from it. There were some other people that said there was some notes in the file that wasn't turned over to the defense at the time of the trial regarding some people who had threatened the victim, Haymon Lee, in this case. But I want to talk about that DNA. The fact that he was excluded from that particular DNA, I find it interesting that they chose to dismiss the charges and choose not to try him again when I don't know, and I've seen a lot of cases like this, it doesn't necessarily mean that he wasn't involved.
You're right, Michael, because the evidence, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So we definitely can't say for sure just because there's no physical evidence in a case, because in years past, there weren't a lot of cases that did have forensic evidence. And as time has gone on and technology has advanced, clearly we have seen so many more cases like this. But before, murder cases were largely testimonial. So in this case, the fact that they're not going to try the defendant again is, I think, a clear statement that times have changed since the DNA was used or was not used that included or excluded anyone since the first time that this case was tried. And they think that based on the technology now and the way that things are now, the way that culture is and everything with juries, they might not feel like they can get a conviction, so they don't feel like they have the evidence to be able to try it. Like it's not going to stand up in court to scrutiny, and it may not at this point.
Randy, quickly, I only have a few seconds left. The family's appeal, the brother's appeal might not be worth anything because of the timing, but the family's appeal is requesting an opening up of this hearing. Do you think the Court of Appeals is going to do it?
From what I know, I don't think so. Prosecutors, they spend a lot of time. They're not going to dismiss the case unless they really don't think they can win it. I think they're going to get some deference from the Court of Appeals.
All right, switching gears now for a second. Nearly 20 years after the death of his wife, Lacey, and unborn son, Connor, Scott Peterson could find out any moment if he gets a new trial. A California judge has until Friday to release her decision. Now, the reason he may get a new trial is alleged juror misconduct by this woman, Rochelle Nice. Nice was originally an alternate juror, but joined the main jury during deliberations during the guilt phase. The panel, of course, found Peterson guilty for double murder and sentenced him to death. Court TV anchor Ted Rowlands has more on Peterson's quest for a new trial and why prosecutors believe he shouldn't get one.
Shackled and carrying a folder, convicted double murderer Scott Peterson walked back into the same courtroom where he was convicted and sentenced to death 18 years ago for murdering his wife Lacey and unborn son Connor. Peterson is asking for a new trial, alleging that one of the jurors, Rochelle Nice, lied to get onto the jury. Peterson's lead appellate attorney Cliff Gardner argued that Nice not only lied to get on the jury, but was likely biased against Peterson.
Ms. Nice refused to speak with anyone from the defense. She refused to speak with anyone from the prosecution. She was subpoenaed to testify, as Your Honor knows. She exercised her privilege against self-incrimination, and she refused to testify unless she was given immunity from prosecution. This is as far from a cooperating witness, I think, as you can get.
Gardner also brought up the fact that Nice called Peterson's unborn son Little Man when she joined the deliberations after being an alternate.
When she was seated as a juror, Your Honor will recall she was an alternate. When she was seated as a juror, the court has the standard admonition. Your Honor talked about standard admonitions, and here's another one the court gave. When you're seated as a juror and you begin deliberations, don't take a firm position early. Don't announce it. Discuss the case. And she ignored that admonition, as I think we all agree. Now, that isn't misconduct. It's not a mandatory admonition. But what she did say before she even sat down at the table, when she was admitted to that jury room, according to Juror Baratlas, she said, let's get Mr. Peterson for what he did to Little Man. That, too, is consistent with someone who has a focus on or history of having been in fear for her unborn baby's life.
Judge Ann Christine Mazzullo must decide if Rochelle Nice committed juror misconduct, and if she did, was she biased against Peterson during his trial?
With Miss Nice, you got what you got.
Dave Harris, a member of the original team that prosecuted Scott Peterson, argued that Rochelle Nice didn't lie to get on the jury and certainly had no bias against Scott Peterson.
She did the best that she could. But being wrong does not necessarily make it false or make her a liar. It just might be that she's really bad at filling out forms.
Harris also argued that during voir dire, Nice was about to be dismissed, but as she was walking out of the courtroom, she was stopped by Peterson's defense team.
She's trying to leave. This is not, wait, I really want to be here because I'm going to secretly get this guy. You know, if that's the case, she's the world's worst spy because she's already been excused. But instead, she's brought back and she's starting to ask questions about being fair.
Scott Peterson's family sat behind him during the arguments. Lacey's family, including her mother, Sharon Rocha, sat in the jury box, out of the camera's view, but in direct line of sight of the man they still absolutely believe murdered Lacey and Connor.
We all know each other. We have a foundation. We've known each other for years. We were all at Scott and Lacey's wedding, and there's not, you know, and different events throughout their lives, and so there's not I don't feel a sense of animosity or hatred or you know, I have nothing but empathy and care for all of her family and friends.
And coming up on Wednesday, there's a status conference scheduled. The judge requested the hearing be set to address a matter with counsel. Now, this issue is apparently separate from the new trial request, and the new trial will not be discussed during that particular hearing. All right, coming up next, the Libyan intelligence official accused of making the bomb used in the second most deadly terrorist attack against the U.S. has been taken into U.S. custody. There were 259 people killed that day over Lockerbie, Scotland. We hear from a family member fighting for justice. Coming up next here on Court TV.
Your inspection and estimate.
Welcome back. Topping our news across the nation. This weekend, the University of Idaho held its winter graduation as police continued to hunt for the killer of 4 students. 21-year-old victim Kaylee Gonsalves would have been among those graduating. Her family says she had a marketing job lined up in Austin, Texas. Now, there was a moment of silence after the University of Idaho President Scott Green spoke about the students' deaths at the ceremony.
It's been a tough few weeks for our community, and I want to acknowledge an enormous loss in our Vandal family recently. Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Maddie Mogan, and Kaylee Gonsalves were taken from us far too soon by a senseless act of violence. They were bright lights on our campus and cherished members of our community.
Now, investigators announced last week that they are looking for a 2011 to 2013 Hyundai Elantra with an unknown license plate that was spotted near the home. So many calls have come in that the FBI is now helping sort out the leads.
Our analysts have spent hours sorting through and trying to come up with the most relevant tips first for the investigators to follow up on. They have re-interviewed some of the folks we've interviewed earlier in this investigation to clarify information. Sometimes when new information comes forward, the people that we've spoken to beforehand may have new insight on that. So it does often seem like we're backtracking, but we're really just trying to get the most important details and the best timeline that we can come up with.
Now, others are chiming in on the case. Former senior FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole says police should be looking for someone in the community.
We want to look for somebody that has blended back into society, but someone who has a hatred, not necessarily for that specific person, but maybe for a group of people that that victim represented.
Moving on now, the gunman who pleaded guilty to state charges in the massacre of 10 black people at a Buffalo supermarket would be willing to plead guilty to federal charges if he was spared the death penalty. Peyton Gendron pleaded guilty late last month to state charges of murder and hate-motivated terrorism, guaranteeing that he will spend the rest of his life in prison. But he still faces separate federal hate crime charges that could result in a death sentence. Now, at a status conference on Friday in the federal case, they asked lawyers why they were devoting time and effort to evidence related to Gendron's guilt when he has already pleaded guilty in state court. Defense attorney Sonia Zoglin said Gendron is prepared to enter a guilty plea in federal court in exchange for a life sentence. And a Libyan intelligence official accused of making the bomb that brought down a plane over Lockerbie, Scotland back in 1988 has been taken into U.S. custody and will face federal charges. A press conference at Victoria Cummock, the wife of one of the victims, spoke about the crash and its impact.
At that moment, 270 lives were shattered, and thousands of victims' loved ones from 21 nations were left to pick up the pieces. Regular people like you and me began a stalwart quest to ensure justice would be served by identifying and holding accountable all those responsible for the second most deadly terrorist attack against America in U.S. history. The U.S. apprehension and arrest of Libyan terrorist suspect Abu Ayala Mohammed Massoud is the first tangible step made by the U.S. Department of Justice in 34 years to hold any suspect accountable in U.S. courts.
Now, the horrific attack killed 259 people in the air and 11 on the ground. And the arrest of Abu Ayala Mohammed Massoud is a milestone in the decades-old investigation. American authorities in December 2020 announced charges against Massoud, who was in Libyan custody at the time. He is the third Libyan intelligence official charged in the U.S. in connection with the attack. All right, folks, we're going to take a break now. Coming up next in our Talkback segment, the defendant in the killed while babysitting trial took the stand in his own defense. So we want to know, what did you think of Aaron Dean's testimony? But first, an important programming note. Tomorrow night on Closing Arguments, our Chanley Painter sits down for a one-on-one interview with Johnny Depp's defense team. From